Oh my goodness, welcome back. Today we are doing another reaction video. We are reacting to Pack's video called Top 5 Ways to Actually Get Better at Yu-Gi-Oh! And Alphonse tried to jump and missed. Anyway, come here, as a newer Yu-Gi-Oh! Player, I've been playing for about a year. I'm always trying to figure out how to get better. And so I'm hoping that this video is actually useful to me, or I can relate to it in ways that I feel like I've gotten better. So yeah, let's get into it.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be going over the top 5 ways to actually improve at Yu-Gi-Oh! So I want to be a little bit more specific about what exactly I mean by this.
Yes, what do we mean by actually get better?
Very specific,
like win
actionable
more?
Things you can maybe take today, apply this week, and hopefully feel a difference. And in fact, I actually wrote a full guide on all of this over in Metafy, where you can check in the description box below, which is improving your Yu-Gi-Oh! Fundamentals. So if you guys want a complete deep dive, you can check the link in the description box below. And yeah, we can talk more about it at the end. But first, let me show you exactly what's in some of the content there. So as you guys know, I've been playing the game for now about 6 years. And I thought a lot about what separates players who kind of plateau and players who are constantly improving, getting better. And so these five
when we're saying
are sort of my top 5 in terms of how to, get to that next step. So number 5,
right? Like I'm assuming that when we're talking about improving, it's what I would say is probably winning more games. But also I felt like there was an improvement for me when I felt like I could look back at my games and be like, oh, I could have done this. I realize I made an error, like where I could look back at my games and say like, oh, I played this to the best of my ability. I will say, as someone who's not trying, I feel like most of us are not trying to be like Yu-Gi-Oh! Worlds, Nationals, Champions. Like, I'm just trying to have fun with the game and feel good about it. So getting better at Yu-Gi-Oh! For me would be having more interactive turns, having a better understanding of what I did and how I could do better, and obviously, winning. Winning is always fun. Number 5.
Rulings. I think this is a pretty interesting one.
I hear this a lot
it
from
sounds
people.
like a boring answer, but just hear me out a bit, right? So,
okay, so my boyfriend is a judge, Konami judge, and this is his biggest thing. Like as soon as we were playing, and he was like, "You got to know your rulings," and that's his biggest tip is know your rulings. And so much of that I feel like is because people cheat at Yu-Gi-Oh! And we don't even mean to, like, including myself. I don't even mean to. So the more you know about your deck and your opponent's deck and the rulings, like, I feel like it's kind of a sucky part though, like the fact that you have to like deeply know all of these things. But it also allows you to like maneuver around stuff better because you know the ruling.
I think people genuinely underestimate how much not knowing certain rulings basically cost them games, matches that they basically should have won.
Not knowing what your opponent's cards do.
This applies just policy or specific deck interactions or card interactions in general. The thing is, you don't really need to know every single interaction in the game. Honestly, that's not really realistic, and it's not necessary to do all of that.
That's a lot of work.
What you need to kind of do is understand the premise of all the rulings, so that regardless of the interactions, how cards work. And what I mean by this is instead of trying to memorize this specific interaction of A, B, and C, it's you understand the premise for why it's ruled a certain way. And if you understand the premise, then you can apply that to other cards, and instead of and in that way you can be.
I don't know if he's going to give examples, but I always need examples. What I immediately thought of is an illegal play that I just have recently made, where I activated Backup Ignister to special summon when I had a red ransom that had been summoned from banishment. And so I'm thinking it's more wording, like reading Backup at Ignister says if it was special summoned from the extra deck. And so understanding the wording of your cards and how that plays into rulings, because it doesn't just say if it has an extra deck monster, it has to be special summoned from the extra deck. And Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards are very specific that way. So because my red ransom was special summoned from banishment, she's no longer special summoned from the extra deck. So I almost feel like when he's saying these no generalization rulings, it's more of the wording. why was it ruled that way? Because of the wording. Why can't I chain SB as chain 3 to my chain 2 imperm? Because of the wording of when. And once you understand the wording of cards, I mean, that's where the rulings come from, is the wording of the cards. And I feel like that's a lot easier to generalize out because Yu-Gi-Oh cards follow similar wording. I mean, they're worded, when is going to be when, if is going to be if, semicolon, colon, like knowing all of that stuff. I feel like is probably what he means by this.
Up to date, right? And that basically allows you to have a stronger foundation or fundamentals so that when you get approached with other scenarios related to something similar, you're able to best tackle that. So, and basically what happens is when you don't know your rulings, however, when you're at a tournament, a situation comes up, you and your opponent argue about something, you call the judge. Sometimes the judge is not perfect. They might rule incorrectly.
I've heard
and
that
you might
that's a
not
thing.
appeal as a result because, you just try.
I fully realized me being like, my boyfriend's a Yu-Gi-Oh judge, does not hold the, okay, but is he any good? That like, I kind of was like, oh, like to be a Yu-Gi-Oh judge means you must know your rulings. I know different levels of judges that there's then that qualification, but I know some people who are, Yu-Gi-Oh judges who don't trust them. I would never try. If I called judge and that person came up and was like, how can I help you? I'd be like, can there be a judgier judge? Can there be an adult for the adult? Like, you don't know jack. How did you, because it's like an online quiz, basically. I actually want to look into getting mine just because I just think it's so cool to be a judge. My boyfriend actually knows his rulings. When I say he's a Konami judge, I mean that he is a Yu-Gi-Oh nerd. That actually is like a smart one. Because I have heard that like not knowing your rulings, if you call a judge over, you can get the judge might not know. I know at bigger events they really try to make sure that they're knowledgeable judges, but there's not a guarantee that the judge at your regional actually knows what's happening. They could just be someone who took the online quiz that I think you can cheat on, honestly. So yeah, knowing your rulings really helps you make your case and have confidence, right? If the judge comes over and you're like, well, I don't, maybe I think like, but if you're like, I know for a fact, this is what's happening. I think it's going to be harder for the judge to rule against you because you're having the confidence instead of being like, maybe this is how it works.
Trust the judge, which is completely fair, but if you are more confident and you know exactly how it should be ruled, you can, more likely to appeal, which Intel allows you to
confidence is key.
Win a game you're supposed to win because based off a correct ruling, right? So sometimes you do a play as well where you thought something works a certain way, and as a result, you give your opponent a free window, you burn your resources, or sometimes it just costs you the game completely, and obviously you can't really take it back in a tournament setting. So I think this fix is genuinely easy. So before you sit down for your next event, or as you play more
Watch
and
my
more,
Learn to Play Yu-Gi-Oh series.
you should understand the premise of the ruling rather than trying to memorize interactions.
You don't gotta
I
watch
think
it.
memorizing interactions is what
Watch what you
causes
want.
people to get confused.
Learn how you learn.
Or they misappropriately, use a certain interaction that they memorize and apply it incorrectly, right? So understanding the premise of knowing your rulings is going to be key, and so that's why it's on my number.
The amount of games that I won because I didn't know the transcode lock, the transcode talker lock, and my opponent didn't know the transcode talker lock. Those were great times. I was winning when I shouldn't have. Okay, what's number 4?
On the list for me? Number 4 is in terms of how to actually build a deck, right? Like the deck building fundamental.
You go to Google. We can go on to number 3. I'm sorry. I'm gonna hear him out. But are you saying I have to build from scratch to be good at a net deck for life? Because how?
Mentals. I think most people, what they do is they copy off a list from a tournament result or something, and they just call it a day, maybe make some few changes.
Yeah.
But I think as a starting point, I think that's actually fine. I think that's actually solid. And you're not always
think
going to need
for
to reinvent the wheel every
quite a
format,
few
right? Like
people,
Draco
that's
Tail was pretty much the
even out
same
as a
deck
starting point,
across the
it's fine.
format. Like Draco Tail brand literally didn't really change that much at all. Like, but I think if you want to develop,
Sorry, I feel the way Yu-Gi-Oh is. I understand with Genesis, build your deck, go crazy. You can probably come up with so many new things, but like in Advanced, this idea that you can go in and be like, I'm going to reinvent Draco Tail. I'm going to reinvent Cool Tunes. I'm going to reinvent Elf Notes. Like, I think there's things that you can find that work specifically in your locals, because you have to take into consideration. I do think that part of deck building, right? Once you start playing, and if you play in locals, considering what are people playing, what are people not playing, and building, right? Like, I have Di-Fi back in the main. No one has a way to deal with Di-Fi at any of the places I play with. It's phenomenal. But if you go in and you're just like, I'm going to look up cards and have fun deck building, I'm going to have a funsy little time, and you take that to locals, look at the top deck lists of like regionals of like big events. Any Malice deck that has topped, it's basically my deck with a couple tweaks. Like, I don't think you're going to be able, if you can build some phenomenal, then you're probably winning events with those, because there's only so many. Like, I feel like if you net decked all of like the top decks right now, they're all going to look the same. And it's not because those players are bad. It's just because like there's kind of like a streamlined way of playing Yu-Gi-Oh in certain archetypes.
yourself as a player, you're going to need to go beyond being dependent on what someone, on what someone else is doing well with, and rather try to understand at the end of the day the rationale for how their deck is built, right? So the explanation on how they built their deck is more important than what their deck looks like. Why do you have the cards in your deck? And you have to understand, kind of like break down, okay, does their explanation for why the cards they're playing in the deck actually make sense? And so and the reason to understand all of that is that as you get into the minds of how people build their decks, like how the top player builds their deck, why does it look the way it does, why is their card in that deck versus X, Y, and Z, you get to basically develop a better understanding of rationale, and then when it comes to building your own decks, you can then start applying some of your own thoughts. You combine with what you've learned, and you're able to have a more cohesive deck, in my opinion. And deck building is a skill, like any skill that it can be developed. It's just that a lot of people really don't get to flex the deck building muscle, because a lot of people really do just
I do have a reason,
take a list off of tournament results. Or
like
whatever.
A lot of the time I'm like, why have 3 March Hairs? Because all the decks have 3 March Hairs.
Sometimes the tournament result isn't even the end all be all. I would say you can still improve on a lot of people's deck lists, and so I think that's kind of like where I would say the way you best want to learn how to build a deck is to kind of like pick a deck apart and then try to figure out what's
like put me in a Ferrari. It's not going to be nearly as classy and well driven as like a Formula One racer, right? Like you can, and this is I've seen this issue before. You give, there's like the net deck, right? And I've seen people specifically like in Juhu format, Yummy is doing well, so I'm gonna make Yummy, and that means I'm gonna start winning. That's not how that works. You can have the most powerful deck. You could have every single card for the most powerful, Yu-Gi-Oh deck that's currently out there that's winning everything. You have to pilot it. And that's where rationale of like, I think where I've gotten better is thinking like, wait, I don't use these strategies, or I don't fully understand these strategies, so I'm going to take these cards out of my deck. Or like, I love having Imperm. I get told sometimes of like, I say like having 3 Imperms of like, why I have Imperm? And it's like, well, because I don't have to worry about when timing. I can play it from hand. And I am not really good at board breaking. Personally, I'm just not good at board breaking. So I'd rather just run a crap ton of hand traps. I'd like to have the Imperm. Even with the Impulse, with the Spark, with the Ash, with the Ghost Spell. Give me as many hand traps as you possibly can, because I know me as a player. I'm not gonna break the board, but I'm gonna make it really hard for you to do everything you want to do with that board.
Wrong with it. Or like, why does this not make sense, right? Like, if your opponent expects a lot of Draco Tail, why are they maining Droll, right? If 80% of the room they're expecting is to be playing Draco Tail, why is Droll in their main deck? So that's kind of like the questioning of the inquiry that I'm kind of talking about, is that you have to kind of like be willing to question, critically think about cards in your deck, and instead of just kind of putting cards at random. Also, side decking, guys, should be built last. I see a lot of people too focused on like trying to like how do I build a side, like how do I side, all that stuff.
I still don't always side.
You got to build your main deck first before building the side deck, or else the side deck doesn't actually make sense. I also think having a pattern in terms of like how cards go in and out for every matchup and making a list of that also helps your win rate a lot, because a lot of people kind of like just throw cards that are good. Like they're just putting, I was throwing 3 Fua at my side, I was throwing 3 Pirelli, I was just throwing 3 Lightning Storm, Duster, like cards that are like high value but doesn't make sense in the context of in the scheme of how your deck functions, right? For instance, I'll give you a good example with Phoenix with Yummy. It was a deck that didn't play Fua, didn't really play maybe some people played Pirelli, but didn't really play Fua because it was a deck that it's the game plan was to full stop its opponent through hand traps, through non-engine. So it didn't make sense to side a card like Fua, because if you're trying to full stop your opponent, you're probably not really going to get draws off Fua. So instead of siding Fua, you're going to side more ways to full stop your opponent, right? So that's an example where like your side deck needs to match the game plan of your,
should I take Fua
your main
out
deck,
of my
or
side?
else, you know.
Wait a second. Should I take Fua out of my side? Because I'm trying to stop you. What if I just put in, wait. He's cooking. Let him cook. Let him cook.
You know, where typically you would side Fuas, you wouldn't do it here, right? So, and I think once you develop that deck building skill along with like your side decks and stuff, I think that's going to help you compete and do a lot better. Second is the information game. So what I mean by this is one of the most underrated skills in Yu-Gi-Oh is being able to understand and read information. What I mean by this is your opponent doesn't know your hand, you don't know theirs, and that uncertainty that is key. So what I mean by this is a lot of people sometimes like scoop because they're looking at their hand, they're like, well, if my opponent negates this, I guess I lose. So they scoop before actually doing that play. So what I mean by this is like you have to take advantage of the fact your opponent doesn't actually know your hand. They might actually let that card go or resolve because they don't actually know your hand, you know. So I think that's one key thing that I've learned is that like you have to.
Every time I start with Malice and Underground, it gets ghost spelled because everyone is like, you never start with Underground. That must be the only thing you have. I do think, I'm wondering if he's kind of also getting into like reading like trying to figure out what your opponent has, which is I think a really top level skill, which is hard. I do think it does make you better at the game, but it's like the how, like how do you try to figure out if your opponent has the Droll? How do you try to figure out if your opponent has the Ash? But I think trying, as frustrating as it was, I'm very grateful that when I was learning and as I'm still learning, there is this like you try to break the board. Try to do as much combo as possible. Like you don't know what I have. I don't know what you have. You're never going to learn if you just like get defeatist and you're like, oh, I don't have anything. So scoop.
Play or in a way that bluffs cards you have or may not have. And that's going to be how you're going to win some games that you're not supposed to win. And it's like very underrated skill in my opinion. I also would say in terms of information is trying to keep track of cards your opponent are searching. Why did they search that card? If they search that card, what does it mean in terms of cards they can have in their hand?
How do you do this though? There's so much
every
thinking.
single time they make a decision or an action in the game, you should be able to try to pick up on the hidden information that you're getting from such action, right?
Look, I think I would need, you know, like in Limitless, the movie, that little pill he takes where he's like his mind expands. My squirrel brain can barely keep track of what I'm doing, let alone what you're doing. I don't know. I'll get better at it. I need to practice locking in. But historically, locking in has never been my strong suit. So I get distracted and I don't remember what you searched. But I know I won't get better if I don't.
Like, unless people are irrational, we're assuming these people are all rational people, which means they do things for a reason, which means you should try to understand what that reason is, and being able to sit down, figure that out will really help you in the long run and improve at the game. So every time I play against my opponent, I always question, why did my opponent do this in this order? Like, why did my opponent activate this card?
I like that he's giving things to think.
Why did they activate
like not just telling you to do this,
why
but
didn't
being
they wait
like,
till
here's what I think.
Is it just because of Droll? Is there another reason? Try to like basically just trying to understand. And then at the same time, you also think about what kind of information you're giving away by playing your card in a certain way, right? So, sometimes it makes more sense to intentionally play your hand in a way which maybe makes your hand seem weak, so your opponent is forced to hand trap it, so that in the hopes that you pass, but in reality, you already had the extender, right? But you wanted to bait the hand trap out of your opponent's hand. So it's better to commit like the card to make it seem like you're a little bit weaker.
You don't have
right?
to do the combo. Memorizing the combo does not mean you have to do it that order every time.
Third piece. The second piece is like technical play. So I think this one is honestly the main reason or the biggest gap between the good players and like the people who are trying to get better. Technical play is basically about making the correct decision in the moment, in the heat of the moment, right, with limited time, right? So it's not about making the correct play, it's about making the correct play with limited time, because in theory, if you have unlimited time, you could sit there and figure the play out. But in tournament setting, quite frankly, you don't have unlimited time. You're going to have to figure the thing on the spot, right?
Skill.
So
it's a really hard skill.
Sequencing the right plays, using the correct resources, organizing your chain in the right way, not giving your opponent information or opportunity.
Well, and trusting your decision making. Like you're sitting there and it's like, I could link into this link 5, I could link into Firewall, or I could link into Ignister, or I could link into the Topologic Bomber Dragon, and like whatever, like, and you have to get all this information and like figure out what to do with it, and then sit with your decision. And after the game, you can be like, okay, pros and cons of the decision. Sometimes it's immediately a con. You're like, like, I think about a game I played where I'm playing against Elf Note, and I use my Link 4 access code to pop. I had 3 pops. So I do a monster, the Welcome Home, and another monster. I leave their Elf Note's trap, continuous trap on board. Because I thought I remembered it specialed. I didn't realize it also negates. So I go into my Blaster Dragon, my Link 5, where you can't special summon into the middle without triggering it. And I'm like, haha, pass. Okay, in the draw, what I think is called Rhapsodia of Madness, negate. And it's like, that was a decision I made that like in a timely manner, yes. And had I had more time to pick up all the cards and read them, I probably would have made a different decision. But like, you gotta make your decisions.
Recognizing when you have multiple lines and choosing the one that basically gives you the best chance is going to be what technical play is all about, right? So one of the most common technical errors I see is people just autopilot their combos. They do like the one card combo every single time, which is fine.
I just said that.
But sometimes and this happens because you probably done
in actual play, you rarely get to do your combos. Learning Yu-Gi-Oh, I feel so jaded that anyone was ever like, watch this combo video, memorize this combo video, and that's how you play Yu-Gi-Oh. You know how often I get to normal summon Dormouse? Send White Rabbit, bring back White Rabbit, set the MTP, put those into Lizard, Lizard into the Dormouse, Dormouse to then come back, those 2 into Red Ransom. I can tell you the combo. Guess how many times you get to actually do the combo? So rare. You have to draw. First of all, you have to draw the cards that would be required, right? Even if it's a 1 card starter, 1 card out of 40. You have a 1 in 40 chance of getting that card in your hand. Next, your opponent has to have nothing. They cannot interact with you. Combos are great to like understand ways to get into end boards. I feel like it's more helpful to look at end boards. What are you trying to end on? And reverse engineer it. How do you get there? And there's combos that can be ways to get there, but what are other ways you can get there?
This combos 1,000 times already, so you're just gonna run through it on autopilot. It's kind of like maybe you should consider pivoting if your opponent, I guess, gives you a little bit more information about their hand, right? It's about that hidden information I was kind of talking about, number 3, which is like, maybe because my opponent hand trapped in such a weird way, it could be possible they have this one other hand trap. Maybe I should be thinking about it. Or like, let's say I'm playing into Sky Striker. My opponent decided to use Widow Anchor and take. That could mean that they have it doesn't necessarily eliminate the fact that they don't have another Widow Anchor. It means that they could have a droplets to sack the monster away so that they can use their other Widow Anchor, right? So it's like, okay, well, if I think they have droplets, how should I play my hand out in response to the card they have? A lot of people do make the right reads, but they're not playing the hand in a way in response to the read that they're making, right? So I think that's like one of the skills, right? And this also applies to like how you play on your opponent's turn too. So like how are you using your hand traps? Like, are you using it at the right time? You're using it a little bit too early.
On your opponent's turn.
So technical play is not about
So
how well
hard.
you go first as well. It's also about how well you go second and using those hand traps. At the same time, if you're playing board breakers, like, okay, well, how should I sequence my board breakers, right? In a way that it makes the most sense. And last but not least, I think the best and number one way to improve, and this is how I got a lot better, is to basically watch your replays, use your replays, and your testing sessions with intention. So what I mean by this is,
okay, so this is something I feel like I've gotten so much better from all of you, from making content, because it is given an intentionality to watching my replays that I never thought of filming and watching. It was one of those things that, like, do I want to get better at Yu-Gi-Oh? Did I want it bad enough to make my brain focus on doing that? No. But I wanted to make content. I thought it was so fun to like edit the videos, and then filming my games and watching them back. And especially now that I've been editing the replays with like the cards and explaining the chains, and it's made me so much better doing that, because now I have an intentionality. But I'm like the person who, if they mess up my food order at the restaurant, I'm gonna ask if you can tell them. I'm be like, I don't like this, but like I'm too nervous and too anxious to say it. But if they mess up your order, I'll be like, they wanted mashed potatoes and you brought them baked. Fix it for my good friend. Like, when I'm doing stuff for other people, it really helps overcome a lot of the like anxiety that I have. Like doing stuff for myself, oh my gosh, unheard of. But so making the videos, it was through the lens of like, I'm not looking at my replays to make myself better. I'm looking at my replays to help other people and to explain for other people. And inadvertently, it really has made like a really big difference. So
you can have all
to all
the
of you,
knowledge in the
honestly.
world, but if you're not internalizing it through
That's
your
why I'm
reps
doing it.
and correcting your mistakes over time, then you're not really going to get better, right? And a lot of people are actually leaving their potential on the table because they're basically playing games, but they're kind of mindlessly just churning games in without actually constantly thinking about, okay, I lost this game because of X, Y, and Z. I could have done this. I think that would have been a lot better.
After. Get people to play with that you can afterwards be like, hey, let's like
what
review
they
that
could
game.
have done, right? And if you think about replays, a lot of people just don't watch them at all, or they watch them once, they cringe at the misplay they made, and it's kind of just move on. But that's not really how you get better. When you go back on a replay, you need to be asking yourself specific questions, right? Like, where did I actually lose this game? Like, where did it fall apart? What was the actual turning point? Was there a line I missed? Did my opponent do something that gave me information that I should have picked up on? Did my opponent do something that did not make sense for my opponent to have this card? So why was I playing around it? Was there a moment that I was playing scared instead of just making the right play? And the goal isn't to feel bad about making these mistakes, but it's to identify a thing that you can do differently next time, and that's going to constantly compound over and over again until eventually you just kind of like second nature do the better play, right? And yeah, and I think that's going to be one of the key top 5 ways I think you can actually improve at the game. Now, everything I covered in this video is kind of like the overview. If you guys want the full detailed breakdown of these 5 areas plus more, I wrote a complete guide on Metafy called Improving Your Yu-Gi-Oh Fundamentals, which I think is basically a compilation of things which I knew when I was trying to go from a beginner to an intermediate to a pro within Yu-Gi-Oh, that I wish that if I had earlier on, I could have definitely accelerated my process, and things that I actually personally did myself as I was on the come up to get better and better at the game. So if you guys haven't gotten a chance to look at that already, definitely go check that out. The links are in the description, and if you guys are serious about improving the game, then you can also let me know by reaching out to me on Metafy or Discord. Well, hopefully that wraps it up for today. Thank you guys for being a part of this. Let me know if you agree, disagree.
That was good. Yeah, I think all of those were great, especially because I think so much of how to get better at Yu-Gi-Oh can be so abstract. I mean, I still think there's some abstractness in it, but I really did like the inclusion of like questions you're asking, things that you're asking yourself mentally, things you're thinking. Honestly, like the biggest thing I got from that is like, why do I have Fuas in my side? My only answer is because everyone plays Fuas. I would rather side in droplets. I would rather side in something, another hand, drolls, more hand traps. Like, I would rather side in so many other, like, I was just doing FUA because everyone does FUA. And like the thought of like, but does that work for how I play? Does that work for what I feel most like? I already get draws. I got chasey. I got allure. Like I already can get into draws. Why am I'm gonna mess with that. But yeah, I really also, I guess the little thing I would like to add on of ways to actually get better at Yu-Gi-Oh is my biggest tip is have patience with yourself. It's a difficult game, and I think expecting immediate success. I think Yu-Gi-Oh is not just a game that, you know, teaches you how to play this very specific game of Yu-Gi-Oh, but I think why I like it so much is because it also teaches you like a growth mindset, right? Tenacity, patience, keep going when you're frustrated, critical thinking skills, analytical skills. Like it's a card game that you have to work for. And so the payoff, when you finally get it, it feels so good. But like, yeah, you know, have patience with yourself. You've been playing for 6 months, you've been playing for a year, even like 2 years. You know, I think when you can really start looking and being like, well, my gosh, I'm plateauing, and why? If you've been playing for years and you're haven't tried these things, like, are you watching your replays? Are you critically thinking about what you're putting in your deck, what you're siding? Are you asking yourself questions? Have you been working to try to figure out hidden information and known information and like all these things? I think they're very common sense things he brought up if you've been playing. But I also think they're things that very often it's easy to, and sometimes, you know what? I love me a mindless duel. Have fun with it too. That's my other thing. It's supposed to be fun. I know sometimes me and my play group make the joke, like we do this for fun, but we do, right? It's fun. Have fun. Have your mindless duel. You don't have to constantly be worrying about, you know, super tracking. But if you want to get better, have that set time where you're like, I'm going to lock in. Even if it's hard, I'm gonna lock in. Okay, let me show you the baby. Come here, Bubba's. He's looking so handsome these days. Oh, I love you so much. Oh, he hit the mic. Okay, do you have anything to say to the people? No words. No words. Okay, I'll see you on the next one.